the Caitanya Caritamrita class, it's nice to sing this bhajan because it's about Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So the meaning of this bhajan, if you read in the songbook, is quite long, so I won't read it today. But basically, if you have time, please do read it. Then you'll know what we just sung. And it's basically asking for the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and their associates. So we know that without the mercy of the Lord, we can't really get anywhere. So it's a nice bhajan to sing before class. Okay, so today we will be speaking from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, Adi-lila, chapter 14, verses 52 to 55. So because it's verse 55 that has a purport, we'll recite verse 55. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So please repeat after me. Pandita Vidagdha Yuvadhana Dhanyavan Sata Sata Putra Haibe Chirayu Matiman Pandita Vidagdha Yuvadhana Dhanyavan Sata Sata Putra Haibe Chirayu Matiman Pandita Vidagdha Yuvadhana Dhanyavan Sata Sata Putra Haibe Chirayu Matiman Pandita learned, Vidagdha expert and humorous, Yuva young man, Dhanadhanyavan very rich, possessing wealth and rice, Sata Sata seven each, Putra sons, Haibe you will have, Chirayu born with a long life, Matiman and intelligent. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So please repeat after me. They will be learned, clever, and young, and possess abundant wealth and rice. Not only that, but you will each have 7 sons who will live long lives and be very intelligent. Okay, so I'll come back to the purport of that verse, and that's the verse that we will be discussing in detail today. So I'll go back to verse 52. So Shastra Chakshush Prabhu last week Sunday spoke on verse 50 or 51. So as you know, we cover the Caitanya Caritamrita on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. So today I'll be speaking from verse 52. So verse 52, so okay, before I get into it, what I want to say is the overview of the story to put everything in context. So where things are up to right now is that Lord Chaitanya, so the chapter is titled the Lord Chaitanya's Childhood Pastimes. So Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes are being described. And in particular, what is happening right now is that in the Ganges, because remember, Lord Chaitanya used to live in Mayapur on the bank of the Ganges. So what is happening is when he was young, he used to go and tease the other young girls who would go and bathe in the Ganges. And it's also described that Lord Chaitanya, he used to spend hours and hours, like about 5 to 6 hours a day, bathing in the Ganges, just swimming and having fun in the Ganges. He used to like it so much. So this pastime here that is being described is that when he would go and be swimming in the Ganges with his friends, sometimes the girls would also come. And the girls would come to worship the demigods. They would come with a specific purpose. And they would bring with them all these, these prepared trays of sweets and rice and flowers, incense, things like that, to worship the demigods. So that with a specific aim, and the aim would be to get a good husband. So this is what they would be praying for. So when Lord Chaitanya saw this, all the girls from the village over there with their trays prepared to come and worship, then what he would say to them is, you should worship me instead, and I will give you good husbands. Remember, he was just young. He was just a young boy at this stage. But this is what he would be saying to them. And so the girls would come to worship the river Ganges, Mother Ganges, and the goddess Durga. And so he would say to them that the Ganges and goddess Durga, they are my servants. And even Lord Shiva, he is also my servant. So you should pray to me and get these blessings from me. And then he would basically take the offerings that they had brought. So the rice and the sweetmeats and the flowers, the sandalwood pulp, and he would just use it all up. He would eat it up, and he would rub the sandalwood paste on himself, put on the flower garlands, and snatch and eat all the offerings of sweetmeats, rice, and bananas. So then we come to the verses today, 52, that we will be talking on. So I'll read the Sanskrit. You don't have to repeat it after me, and then we'll talk on the verse. क्रोधे कन्या गाना कहे सुना है निमानी ग्रामा संबंधे हायो तुम्ही आमा सबारा भाई. So all the girls, because Nimai, naughty Nimai, at this stage he hadn't become Lord Chaitanya, he hadn't revealed himself as the Lord. So his childhood pastimes, they're really very sweet, very wonderful, just as Krishna's are. Remember, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, but he has come in the mood of Radharani and the color of Radharani. So Lord Chaitanya's childhood pastimes, they're really sweet, really wonderful, and this chapter describes his pastimes really nicely. So what would happen is the girls would become very angry, because they had come with carefully prepared trays and all, clean and dressed up. And so Lord Chaitanya, Nimai, when he would snatch all of this, then the girls would say to him in anger, all the girls became very angry at the Lord for this behavior. Dear Nimai, they told him, you are just like our brother in our village relationship. So what they would say is, you are just like our brother in village relationship. So there's a saying, there's a phrase in Hindi or Sanskrit or Bengali, gaon ke nata. Gaon means village, ke nata means relationship. So according to the village relationship, there are so many relationships in a village, right? So just like we have biological parents, biological siblings, etc., but in a village setting, and for example here at New Govardhana even, it's like a village, and you develop relationships with other people. So the girls are telling him, according to our village relationship, you are our brother. And traditionally, village relationships, they were very significant. They weren't just flimsy, they were very significant. And the reason was that you can imagine that people would be living in a village and they would be there to support and help each other. So there were you have to make it's said that an intelligent person makes his neighbor his friends. And the reason for this is, if you're in trouble, your mother might be overseas, but your neighbors are closest to you. So this is why the village relationship was really very significant. So the girls are reminding him, hey, you are our brother in our village relationship. And then verse 53, Ama Saba Karapakshe Iha Karite Nayuyaya Nalaha Devata Saja Nakara Anyaya. That therefore it does not behoove you to act like this. Don't take our paraphernalia for worship of the demigods. Don't create a disturbance in this way. So the girls would rebuke Nimai and say, don't behave in this way. You're a brother. Why are you behaving like this? Why are you stealing all these things that we have got for the demigods? And don't make a disturbance in this way. So it's really funny that this, you can imagine the scene. And then what would happen is that the Lord would reply, Prabhu kahe toma sabake dila evara toma sabara bharta habe parama sundara. The Lord replied, my dear sisters, I give you the benediction that your husbands will be very handsome. So this is what Lord Chaitanya Nimai Pandit would say to his sisters, that I will give you this benediction that your husbands will be very handsome. And then we move to today's verse, which we have recited and read, that they would be learned, clever, and young, and possess abundant wealth and rice. Not only that, but you will each have 7 sons who will all live long lives and be very intelligent. So, before we unpack the verse, let's read and discuss the purport a little bit. Well, let's read the purport and then we'll start discussing a few points. Okay, so this is the purport then. Generally, it is the ambition of a young girl to have a very handsome husband who is learned, clever, young, and rich. According to the Vedic culture, one is rich if he possesses a large stock of food grain and a very large number of animals. Dhanyena dhanavan gavya dhanavan. One is rich if he possesses food grain, cows, and bulls. A girl also desires to have many children, especially sons, putra, who are very intelligent and long-lived. Now, because society has deteriorated, there is propaganda to have 1 or 2 children and kill the rest by contraceptive methods. But the natural ambition of a girl is to possess not only more than 1 child, but at least half a dozen. In exchange for the paraphernalia of worship, he usurped for himself. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to bless the girls to fulfill all their ambitions and desires. One can easily become happy and obtain the material benefits of a good husband, wealth, food, grain, and a number of nice children by worshipping Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas at a young age, it is not necessary for his devotees to follow him by also taking sannyas. One can stay a householder, but one must be a devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Then one will be happy with all the material opulences of a good home, good children, good mate, good wealth, and everything he desires. Therefore the Shastras advise, Yagnai Sankirtana Prayar Yajanti Hi Sumedasaha. Srimad Bhagavatam 11.5.32. Every householder, therefore, who is actually intelligent should introduce the Sankirtana movement home to home and live peacefully in this life and go back to Godhead in the next. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Okay, so let's discuss a few points from this verse today, which is quite interesting. It's got the Australian word mate in it as well. If you didn't catch that while I was reading the purport. So, okay, so this verse today, we know how we have come to it. So Lord Chaitanya is teasing Nimai Pandit. He's teasing his sisters who have come to the river Ganges to ask for the benediction of good husbands. And he himself has said, pray to me, I'll bless you, and I'm giving you this benediction, you will have good husbands. Not only will they be handsome, but they will be learned, they'll be clever, they'll be young, they'll possess abundant wealth and rice, and then you will have 7 children each, 7 sons each, and that's the Sata, 7. You will have 7 children, 7 sons, and these sons will have long lives and be very intelligent. So this is the blessing that Lord Chaitanya is giving his village sisters. So when we look at the purport, so it said, so what is being explained here is that generally, so the word generally is actually important because not every soul in a female body has the same goals. And not every man in a man's body, every soul in a man's body has the same goals. So, generally, it's the ambition of a young girl to have a very handsome husband who is smart, learned, clever, young and rich. So when we look at this verse, the things that we desire in a spouse is the same, isn't it? So no matter what body we are in, when we look for a spouse, we try to find a suitable spouse. Another way to, one thing that we need to understand when we are reading and discussing this purport is that this is based about 500 years ago. And that the culture back then, the societal setup back then was quite different. In that, women generally did not go out of the house to further their education unless they desired so. They didn't become warriors unless they desired so, unless they had that psychophysical nature, that body built, that mindset. They didn't go out to earn a living, they didn't go out to further their education, they did not go out to fight wars unless they desired to. And they generally stayed at home and looked after the family. So while the husband would go out and collect wealth and do the work, the women generally stayed home and cooked and cleaned and brought up the family and basically led the household. They would be the first teachers as mothers and would have all the household rituals and ceremonies, sort of everything happening in a nice way. So therefore, it was actually very important to get a qualified husband back then, even more than it is now. Reason being, back then, if you can imagine, if a girl wasn't that qualified in terms of surviving themselves without any shelter, without having the support of someone, then it was very difficult. So now we can go out, we can get a job, but back then it was very difficult, and it was rife for misuse and all of that to happen. So if we read the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained really nicely that, when there is no powerful man around to protect the ladies, that the ladies get abused, and then there's unwanted progeny, and because of this unwanted progeny, like, the whole society gets really deranged. So this is why the girls were actually praying for a good husband, for somebody who had these attributes. So when we look at what was desirable, it was to be good looking, to be smart, to be young, and to be rich. And when we look at the opulences that Krishna has, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And why is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So there is a verse. It's because he has 6 opulences in full. He's got 6 things that he has 100%. What are these 6 things? So the verse is Aishwarya Samagrasya Viryasya Yasasha Shriha Jnana Vairagyasya Sanam Bhagam Iti Ganaha. So he is the most handsome of the handsomest, 100%. He is the most powerful. He is the most famous. He is the most knowledgeable. He is the most detached. And there's one more. So good looking, handsome, powerful, knowledgeable, famous, everything that we desire. So if we look at the personalities around us that we are attracted to, why is it that we are attracted to them? So it could be that they're famous, like the movie stars, so that's why we kind of like them a bit, or they might be very good looking, that's why we like them, or they might be very rich, that's why we like them. So when we explore our motives as to why we like somebody, it might boil down to one of these things. And the reason is because Krishna has all these qualities. So we need to direct that liking towards Krishna and understand that, okay, if I like this person for these reasons, I actually probably need to like them for who they are and not for what they, just because they're good looking or they're rich. So Krishna has all these 6 opulences in full, and 100%, and he is the source. So we can imagine how much more attractive Krishna might be to somebody on this planet. And then we look at what we want in a spouse. Those are the same things that we want in a spouse. So it all comes from Krishna. And the second line of this purport is, according to Vedic culture, one is rich if he has a large stock of food grain and a very large number of animals. So that is what the Vedic culture describes as wealth. So wealth is having land and having cows and having natural minerals like gold, silver, gemstones, these sorts of things. So this is what the Vedas describe as wealth. So if we actually look at it a bit closely, we'll see that, for example, recently there was a COVID pandemic, and people in the cities, they struggled because they live in apartments. Their forest, their food source is the supermarket, and a lot of people moved from the cities to this area. I mean, you can see people have moved from Sydney and Melbourne to northern New South Wales, and then from here people have moved to Brisbane. From Brisbane people have moved further north, so it's become like an internal tidal wave of migration. And the reason this has happened is that many people discovered that their lives in the cities were quite superficial and quite tenuous, that they're dependent on the shops, and when the shops are closed, what do? So you can see in that way how practical the Vedas are, in that having land and having animals, cows in particular, that's true wealth. Why? If you look at it, why? Because if you have land, what can you do on the land? You can live on it, firstly, and secondly, you can grow things on it, and then that's your food. And if you have cows, you can not kill them and eat them, because then you won't have any milk, but it's actually to keep the cows for milking. And to have bulls, to use the bulls to till the land. So this is Vedic wealth. And even now, we are encouraged to have land and to have cows if we can. So it's not possible because, it's difficult. Like many people who have tried to keep cows, they have found that it's difficult because the way society is set up now is that you milk the cow, and previously every family would have a cow. In India now, if you go and visit, all the families, they actually have a cow each. Well, most of them. Nowadays it's become more and more modern, but in the villages, every household has a cow. Some actually have buffaloes because buffalo milk is stronger, and they keep the cow in a room, in the same house. And so the cow was meant to be for the family, but and the milk was meant to be for the family users. So milk would be made, yogurt would be made, ghee would be made. I grew up like that actually. I grew up in Fiji, and we had cane farms, and my father was a school teacher, my mother was a nurse, but we still had cane farms that was belonging to the family. And his brothers, my uncles, they all had cane farms, they all had cows. We had a cow growing up. So we would milk the cow, we would make our own butter. It was very yummy. And we would churn the butter, churn the yogurt to make butter, have the yogurt, and make so many different things like the buttermilk then. So like very rich in that way. And that's in Fiji, not India. But the culture is the same pretty much in India and Fiji. And in India, that is still happening, especially in the villages. And it's very rich. In the Krishna book, it's described that when Krishna was born, like we just celebrated Krishna's birthday, Krishna's appearance day 2 days ago. And when Krishna appeared, then it's described that the celebrations were such that the gopas and the gopis, they were throwing milk products on each other. Like that the streets were like there were rivers of milk flowing down the streets. And then it's described that this is how rich they were. So this is real wealth. There's no shortage of any food because you're using the land. So this is Vedic wealth, and we can see the reality of it. And just to give a modern day example, the Hilton chain, so there was a recession some time back, and the reason they survived was because they had diamonds. So then they sold those diamonds and they made their wealth up again. So nowadays what we do, so this is what I said, right? Remember, cows and land and natural gemstones, gold, silver, all of this is true wealth according to the Vedas. So if we are intelligent, we'd actually start accumulating that for ourselves, for our futures. Because not only are we supposed to be materially stable, we are meant to use that material stability then to further our spiritual lives. Because unless we are materially stable, it's very difficult to make spiritual progress. The reason is if we are hungry, if we are worried about our safety, if we are worried about, we're cold, all of that, it's very hard to focus the mind. So we need to look after our material needs as well as our spiritual needs. So, right. Then it is said that a girl also desires to have many children, especially sons who are very intelligent and long-lived. Now, back then again, this was an aim. Of us do have this aim to have many children. Especially sons who are intelligent and long-lived. The reason sons were given more prominence was because they were meant to be then looking after the mother. So in the scriptures it said that firstly a girl is protected by her father, and then she's protected by her husband, and then she's protected by her son. So that a girl should always be protected in this way because they are precious, because they give all the beauty, all the intelligence, all sort of their qualities are different to a man's qualities, the feminine qualities and the masculine qualities we know. And because they are not generally as strong as a man physique is. So this is why women were more desirous of having sons. That as they grew up, their sons would protect them. Now, question, in this day and age, how many sons are protecting their parents?
It's the daughters.
It's the daughters. Actually, isn't it? It's the daughters. We can see that practically. I've seen it practically too. And the thing is, this is what is called the deterioration of society. So this is what it is. Society has deteriorated to this point, and like parents spend so much time bringing up their children, and Vedically, it was the more time, the more attention you spend with your child, that the more likely they are. They're pretty much old age insurance. That's what children were meant for. So that's why people would have lots of children too. And in that, remember, more or less the setup is a farming setup, and the more hands on a farm, the lighter the work. So that was one reason to have more children. And to have more sons, it was for protection and to look after the parents in the old age. Now, you may or may not know, but I work as a doctor. And in my line of work, I see so many old people who are neglected, who are left to fend for themselves, and whose children are not looking after them at all. Really see this in a very real way on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, just yesterday I saw something good. Just yesterday, after the celebration here, I went to work, and a patient of mine brought in her father. The father's 79 years old, and she brought in her father, and she said, "Dad's going to live with me now. I'm going to look after him." And she said, "I knew you were the woman for the job to help me sort him out, so here I am." So I was very happy to help her look after her father. So this is what children were meant for. And see, the one thing is important here, that sons who are very intelligent and long-lived. So if a woman had a child and the child died before, and therefore this lady would not have any protection. And another truth to say now is that right now, if we go to Vrindavan, which is Krishna's city, the reality is we will see many widows there, and we will also see many single mothers there. And what is happening is that, like, society is just completely flipped. Instead of the men being the protectors and the providers, it's the woman who's going out, and they're doing everything. They're being left to look after their children on their own. So look after the children on their own, bring them up on their own, like do everything. Cook and clean and provide and support, go out and earn a living. Just a couple of days ago, I saw a little video on the banks of the Yamuna. There are some very, very nice sitting places. And some tourists were there. And there was this lady with a baby, little baby, and she was doing henna on their hands to earn a living for herself. And one of the tourists was actually holding her baby to give her a break while she was doing henna on their hands. And so she was out there collecting money, trying to raise her family, while the husband was goodness knows where, doing nothing. So this is the reality right now. So you can see how vastly different it is from what the scriptures are describing. So this is why it is important to get a qualified spouse, a qualified man in particular, if you're a woman, and that there actually is a shortage of qualified people around, men and women. There's a shortage. So when we choose a spouse, we actually need to be very careful that they that they're actually qualified and that they will be there as a partner and not as a user. So now, because society has deteriorated, there's propaganda to have 1 or 2 children and kill the rest by contraceptive methods. So this has come around largely because of lack of support and selfishness, that people don't want to have many children. It's come around because of greed, like some countries don't have the space, and there's competition. But naturally, the feminine tendency is to have not just 1 child, but at least half a dozen children. I mean, for myself, I can say that I'm in this female body, but I definitely don't have that many feminine charms. And I guess I'll ask you, how many of you have a desire to have 7 children? None of us at this point.
I've got 6, so I can't talk.
So generally it is said that the natural ambition of a girl is to have not just 1 child, but at least half a dozen. And this is not necessarily true of many of us in this day and age. So Lord Chaitanya, he wanted to bless his sisters, his village sisters, to fulfill all their ambitions and desires. And that if we did have a good husband, if one did have a good, this is why it was so important to have a good husband, that the woman would be taken care of. She would be unburdened. Can you imagine to raise a child and then to also go out and collect money to have enough food in the house? It's difficult. Pretty much being a single mom is really difficult here, let alone in India, where there is not that much jobs available and all of that. So to have a good husband was a very, very important and very beneficial thing, very protective thing. And remember, the emphasis is on good and qualified. And what that means is somebody who would provide, be a good father, and would provide wealth and food grain and a number of nice children. And so and so if even today we see, like, if there is a husband who's got a good job, then the woman of the house doesn't need to go out to work, and that she would be happy going to yoga classes, going to the beauty salons and all of those things. But actually what she needs to be doing is bringing up the family, is concentrating her energies at home, cleaning, cooking, and bringing up the family in a educated way. So being the educators and the leaders at home, this is what a woman's role is. And so but then there's not that stress of having to go out. She might go out to get a job if she wants to, but it's not necessary if there is a good enough provision by the husband. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas at an early age, but it is not necessary for his devotees. And what Lord Chaitanya, what this purport is saying now is that, sometimes there can be a big emphasis on renunciation and not getting married and taking sannyas or staying single, but this purport is telling us that we can stay a householder, but we must remain a devotee of Lord Chaitanya. Then we will be happy with all the material opulences for a materially balanced and opulent life, as well as a spiritual life, if we remain devotees of Lord Chaitanya, such as a good home, good children, a good mate, good wealth, and everything he desires. So the Shastras say something very important, Yajne Sankirtana Praya Yajanti Hi Sumedasa, that every householder should start having kirtan at their house, and peacefully, they will be peaceful in this life, and in the next life they'll go back to Godhead. So I'll just talk on that verse a tiny little bit, which is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, is that very, very important verse. How can we be happy? So we are being told we can be happy if you have if you have material opulence and spiritual opulence. So material opulence is having a good house, enough food, shelter, protection, clothing, all of that. Spiritual opulence is being a devotee of Lord Chaitanya. And can we remain in a household situation yet be spiritually opulent? There's no problem there. This movement of Lord Chaitanya is meant for everybody. We are being told that stay at home, remain a householder. You don't have to become a sannyasi. You can if you want to, if that's your calling, but very, very rare in Kali Yuga. And that remain a householder, but do this. And what is this? Is that in this age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. That intelligent, we have to be really intelligent to have kirtan at home. I know that many devotees, householders who live at home with their children, they try to have kirtan every day. So it's every day, meet me at the altar at 6 p.m. kids, and then there's kirtan at home. So it doesn't matter if there's one person, two people, three people, just having kirtan together is the way in Kali Yuga. And it is said that if we do that, we are actually intelligent. That's true intelligence, having kirtan together, because we have understood what the scriptures are saying and we are practicing it. So this is the most important thing to do, no matter we are a sannyasi or a householder or a vanaprastha, whatever stage of life we are at, doesn't matter. Doing kirtan is really important, and making our kirtan potent by having a good sadhana, by chanting our rounds properly, by following the 4 regulative principles, by doing devotional service, like something that we might have chosen for ourselves to do, such as deity worship, for example, or looking after the cows, like whatever service we might have chosen for ourselves, doing our service, chanting our rounds, following the 4 regulative principles. All of this makes the kirtan more potent. It doesn't matter though, if we are not doing any of that, we can still do kirtan. So it's very, very important that we do kirtan. This is the only way in Kali Yuga. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything additional they would like to say? Can Ekendra Prabhu go first? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the battery ran out yesterday.
Really loud voice, so I'll
Yeah.
use that.
Yeah.
On the internet?
I think the battery ran out yesterday. Oh, they go.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for that class, very informative and sweet. We talked about sounds to me like systemic problem, where people aren't looking after their parents, and those that do are generally female bodies. Why do you think this is? Is it a breakdown of a relationship? Is it the affections aren't there? Because in India, we still see that connection. We still see elderly people living with their families. In your view, why in the Western world has that dissolved so much?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So, I think one of the reasons is that there is a relationship breakdown. Another reason is that, as we know, the cultures are really different. The Eastern culture is really different to the Western culture. And in the Eastern culture, there is a very big sense of duty that is present. like, for example, being the firstborn child carries a different duty, completely different set of duties to being the youngest in the family. To the point that, to the point that we see this in Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, that he was the eldest and it was his duty to be the main protector, and that Lord Lakshmana, who was the younger brother, actually was not able to live independently of Lord Ram. Like, he was totally following the mentality of Lord Ram. So we see that in a family in India, or in the Eastern cultures in particular, that the older child has a lot of responsibilities, and that if he doesn't get married, then the younger child can't get married until the older child is married. Like, this big sense of duty and obligation is there. And traditionally it was the eldest son's duty to look after his parents. And we see, yes, you're right, we do see this still happening in the Eastern families a fair bit. I mean, recently my family visited, my cousin brothers, so my uncle's sons visited me from New Zealand, and we are all originally from Fiji. And so this family had two boys. Unfortunately, the older brother died. And the younger brother was saying to me, it's my responsibility to look after mom, because dad's no longer in this world, so I'll be looking after my mom now. And he's, of course, got his own family, his wife and his children. So that sense of duty is still present, very much so, in the Eastern, or to quite an extent in the Eastern cultures. But yes, you're right. In the Western world, we see that there is a big breakdown, and there are few reasons for this. One of them is that it is Kali Yuga, and generally things have deteriorated everywhere. In the Western world, is more obvious. We know that, right, it's not a new thing, that the impersonalism has been there. It's right there in Prabhupada's Pranam mantra. There's impersonalism, there's voidism, there's a lot of selfishness, and people are generally just looking after themselves. Another reason is that there's a lot of, like, if you look at the, like, just reality, I'm not being judgmental, but just reality. If you look at the Eastern cultures and compare it to the Western cultures, there's a lot of disrespect in the Western cultures. There's not really that, traditionally in the Eastern cultures, there'll be a lot of respect. You can't address your uncles and aunts by names. Anybody older would automatically be an uncle or auntie, even if they're not related to you. You wouldn't ever call them by their name. And just because they're older, you'd show them certain respect, or, there'd be a lot of intrinsic respect, because that's the cultural way. However, in the Western world, there's that intrinsic lack of respect, and that is just not there. So, growing up that way, there is not that sense of duty, firstly, not the respect. So then there's very little. And then you add to that a boy getting married, and then having to look after his wife and look after his children. And if the wife happens to be not so understanding, then it gets very difficult for him to try to keep his mom happy as well as his wife happy. It's like caught between a rock and a hard place. So most, or quite a few people, have to make the difficult decision of being split in two and, trying to keep both parties happy. So this reason, another reason is that, in the Western world, there is a lot of wealth, there's a lot of beauty, but there also is a lot of drugs and alcohol. And these substances, they have, really changed. It's kind of misusing the wealth. And so people are selfish, they're looking after themselves, getting their next high, getting their next alcohol. There's not enough wealth to go around to look after mom and dad. So a lot of people end up in nursing homes. And, it is Kali Yuga to an extent, but it is also how good are your relationships. And at the same time, I have come across many, many Western families, mainly farming families, and they have big families, like One farmer, young man, I just met him the other day. He's got 7 children, actually. I was updating his social history. And he was like, "Oh, you've got 5 children, Mark." "No, no, Dr. Manny, I've got 7 children now." So he's got a big farm, and he's using his children to work on the farm. So it's, anywhere that there is the Vedic type of culture happening, the farming, the large families are helpful. And so I'd say it's a number of things. We can see that there are many close-knit families, even in the Western world, who do have that sense of obligation and duty towards their parents, but, equally there are not as many. So this is what I would say, but if there are other things that can be added, that would be also good from the audience. Or one more thing, like in Bali, for example, did you know, again, I learn a lot from the work I do. So a lot of my Balinese patients, they all seem to have the name Putu. Right? All of them, and I go, "How many of you are Putus? Why? Is everybody related?" But actually, it turns out that the eldest daughter is called Putu. No matter, so every family, the eldest daughter is called Putu, and the boy also has something starting with M. That's what the boy is called if they're the eldest boy in the family. So, so why? Why is this important? It's important because then whole of society would know, "Oh, this is Putu. She's the eldest daughter of that family, so this would be her jobs. This would be her responsibilities. And this is the boy, so he's the eldest boy in the family, so that's it. He's gonna be the one who's gonna inherit the parents to look after." So the roles and responsibilities were that clearly structured that, the birth order was marked. Even now, this is the case. So, yeah. That's what I have to say to that question. Thank you, Prabhu.
I just want to comment also on that question. Do you think it's women's lib that's made the men, get down? Because the women have become stronger, and the women just seem to have, because they've got that more power at the moment, collectively.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, thank you for that. It's true. It's true, you see these new Indian sort of, Bollywood movies coming out or TV series coming out, and, one of the things, these little moral movies that are being circulated, one of them was that this woman who was a working woman was as good as 2 men because she was looking after both her families, looking after not just her parents, but also the husband's parents. So, it's true that what has happened is, again, because of Kali Yuga and because of many, many different things, societal breakdown, all of that, what's happening is that women are realizing, I don't actually need a husband. How dependent women were on husbands before. But now women are realizing, I don't actually need a husband because he's just going to be like another child to look after. Especially in India, you can see this now. Look at these women, they're going out, they're earning a living, and the husband's probably off drinking somewhere, unfortunately, and so it's true that, because women have become powerful, able to fend for themselves, look after themselves, stand on their feet, able to earn a living, they are able to provide for their family and also their parents and also their husband's family. So in one way, though, this is a misuse. And the reason for this is, if the woman is out there doing all of this, what happens is then the family structure isn't as loving and nurturing and a learning environment as it should be because of lack of time. The mother's out there earning a living, who's cooking at home, who's teaching the children all these little things, who's providing, who's doing the cleaning, so then we have to hire a cleaner, we have to put the child in daycare. So it's like a whole breakdown of the cohesive family structure, the warmth, that gets missing. So every working woman needs a balance, and it has to be a good balance to make the family work. And yeah, it's true. That's why it's happening. And we find that many families, it's like everybody in that corner said, it's the girls that are ending up looking after the parents. And one reason for that is that the boys are busy looking after their wives. And so then you can see, is that wife qualified? She should be helping him in his duties. So it's a breakdown on many levels. And all we can do really is, firstly, not identify ourselves with the body, because it's very painful to be just, you're a woman, or you're a man, or you're black, or you're white. So we are the souls, but at the same time, because we are in these bodies, we do have to behave in a certain way. We have a certain set of responsibilities, and we just need to qualify ourselves to be the best person we can be for. And ultimately we have to have good relationships, because it's the relationships that will be protective and will help us in our journey back to Godhead. Okay, thank you so much. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai.